were calling out to that, the power of that water, where that's coming from. That helps me with
the main thing is that the words that we're speaking, they actually have a physiology. They're coming from our experience, and they're meaning something in our experience. Okay, so
excuse me, you said something about wishing you could forget something.
yes,
Has what effect?
it creates a blanket effect for memory. So, for instance, it's possible if I asked you to go back and remember what it was that you were doing at the age of 7, between 7 and 8, it's possible that there's been a shadow cast in the memory somewhat, because there was something at the age of 8 or 9 or 10 or something that cast a shadow over memory, because there was something that you wished you could forget that was happening in life, and you were going through life wishing you could forget this thing. And whilst you were running this program of wishing you could forget, it's oxytocin is being released by the anterior pituitary in the brain, which is actually creating a blanket effect for memory. So it's easy to be able to forget something you'd love to forget, actually.
But does it erase the physiology of it?
It changes the physiology, and it creates a moment in time where the neurochemical composition is one that's actually creating a blanket effect for memory, so that there isn't, to the same degree, in our waking consciousness, of a recall of that moment. It's possible to go back to that memory, yes. It's possible to go back to any memory, and the way to do that would be to access something that's state specific to the memory, and do it through association, by asking the person to remember something, in fact, that was occurring, or by eliciting a universal experience that the person would have had. So let's say the person's experience was at 5 that they're wanting to go back to. So then you would elicit a universal and ask them to remember the first day, in the first days that they were at their school, and remember the smell of the classroom, and to remember looking at the mat, and remember kind of seeing the books and maybe the Cuisinart or whatever it was, the toys and stuff. And slowly the person's able to remember, in fact, through association. The main thing is that there's not a direct path for recall instantly if there was this thing occurring where a person was wishing they could forget something. So yourself, when somebody's walking across the log, or you're walking across the ground, you're always remembering where your feet are, right? But for some reason, when people are walking across the log out here, right, they're going to run a pattern, because it's a novel task, of the sum culmination of those intrinsic strategies that they would ordinarily bring to some task. And so we're watching what's occurring, how this person's participating in the task. So a person's walking across the lawn, and all of a sudden they forget where their feet are, and they have to, look down to see where their feet are. And in doing this, it's like creating a pattern interruption to the process of balance, because the person's forgetting where their feet are. When you know where your feet are, you can be walking. If your foot was out here, you would know where it was. And walking across the log, some people will rush at the end and then miss out on getting what it was that they could have got if they were able to come in easy. So we're going to be teaching you why it is that we're using these elements out here, and that's what this training is about. The use of analog to access some state-specific behaviour, and to use this analog to calibrate what's occurring in the person. What ways of sorting information are they bringing to the task? Where are they positioning themselves in the group? Who is it that they listen to in the group? How do they draw attention in that moment that they're speaking something to the group, which is a way of doing something? Okay, so the one thing here that we've said, which is a distinction, is that we are saying that movement is the broadest pathway for programming the brain. Now, we could talk about this person coming in easy, and we could say, would you enjoy the choice of wiring in a program that you'll have now for life? If you come in easy on the task, it's possible then that you've wired this into your program. To talk about it is light and will account for 20 or 30% of a shift. 120, 130% of a shift would be having the person experience the new program coming in easy. That way then, the body then has a neurochemical configuration that's been wired into their experience. So that the body has to experience a new program for the mind to conceive new possibility. The body has to experience the new program before the mind can conceive of that new possibility. Another thing here that's a distinction is that pleasure neuroinhibits aversion. That you are understanding this, and that aversion neuroinhibits pleasure. Is everybody understanding that? If you remember sometime when you've really been blissed about something, you can't feel averse about something at the same time. That's impossible. Or vice versa, feeling really upset about something and really feeling happy about it at the same time. That's impossible, because one state neuroinhibits the other. So it's likely that when someone's depressed, there's more things that come to them that's about depression, because the system is running. So then when somebody says something to them, they can easily see how much worse it could be, because they're totally in that system of aversion. It's more likely that anything that you would say, there's a way for them to easily take it to aversion. Easily. Even no matter how pristine it is. It's possible for them to flip it in, to perceive it aversively if they're in the aversive system. So the one principle here that we're sharing with you is that pleasure neuroinhibits aversion, and how to go about creating whole brain functioning will be to elicit a degree of resourcefulness. As much as you can do that, that's a good idea to do that. But sometimes you can't do this, can you? And so that you are only able to do what it is that you can do. It's possible that somebody can become so skillful that you do have the ability to be able to impact, and so that you're becoming quite flexible in your way of being able to do that yourself, actually.
So if you're in an aversive state and you keep going there, but a lot of you really wants to go to be positive, you can do that by just doing things, accessing the more pleasure side.
Yes, actually, yes, just what you did with your body language.
Yeah.
You put this stuff over here that was aversive, and then you said, and what about when we go through to pleasure, your body movements, and analog was moving things, more shifting it actually to the left hemisphere, which is involved in pleasure.
So then
You think back to some moment where you really excelled. You think back to some moment where you accomplished something, and actually you think about what you have accomplished. And you think about what you're thinking about accomplishing yourself in your life. And so it's all about, or you welcome this thing. This is what a sage would say to you. Somebody comes to me and they say, I've had frightening thoughts, horrific thoughts in my brain, and you can see it's really disturbed the person. Then I would say to this person to welcome this into your heart. Because the word welcome has a physiology, and now no longer am I moving away from something which creates a possibility of danger. And because if a tiger is approaching you, all right, and you feel inhibited and averse, generally you're going to dissociate, and possibly rather than meeting the energy that's there to quell it, it's possible that your life becomes in danger because you're moving away from something rather than welcoming it. When you're welcoming it, it's using the vestibular system to move towards something, and when you're moving towards something, generally it's to do with you being associated. So you welcome this thing into your heart. The word welcome has a physiology. It changes whatever it was that was there. It was averse. The one thing that will continue the aversion is if you are moving away from it and you're allowing it to really affect you. And if you meet the energy that's there, you're at one with it, it's more likely that you'll survive. Somebody who suffered a great injury and who accepted the injury and were going on with what they needed to do, it's more likely this person would survive than the person who gets injured and then is wanting to move away from that.
When people begin to study this for the first time, I wonder if they have the same feeling that I have, that there's a tendency to put down the aversion part of the right brain. But in that nature gave us that little circuit and everything, we have to know that there's an inherent good in the whole thing. And I guess maybe the tendency is not to see that good in the aversion. But isn't it the aversion that saves us, that gives us that instinct to run if there's an explosion? We naturally want to save our life.
Yes, because actually the aversion and inhibition. Now, if the person is averse and inhibited, then the person's only going to be relying on about a third of their brain. If the person is averse and they're acting, in other words, they're associated, then the person is going to have more use of the whole of their brain. If the person is averse and inhibited, then the way that their coping strategy, then this is possibly not a survival strategy. Possibly it came from a time when we would freeze and maybe blend into the woodwork, actually, from a time gone by. Anyway, the main thing is that this word welcome, that I welcome this into my heart, it changes whatever it was that was there, because the word welcome is something that's positive, actually, rather than actually like the friend who was in California met the energy of the rain and was able to survive out in the cold, whereas someone who really was feeling the aversion of the cold, this person would not survive. If John were caught out in the cold, and it was about 30 degrees and he hardly had any clothing on, he would survive if he was accepting of this situation. It's much more likely that he would survive. Are you understanding that? So that he's welcoming this. If this is a situation, that he's stuck in this situation, that he's welcoming this situation to him. Because if he's moving away from it, he is going to go into a part of his brain where he's possibly not going to survive. And someone like this will die of hypothermia very quick.
So the advantage of aversion may be that it makes us stop for a second, shift states, and welcome. Allows us to welcome.
Yes, so the aversion is feedback, yes.
We have to shift states.
Yes, so that's what we are talking about, how you go about shifting, how you go about creating wellness when there is a need to actually shift something that's been imparted in you. So that's one technique, is actually to welcome this. So for instance, I'm walking along the street as an example, right, and all of a sudden I feel in fear of my life because of some dog. I might imagine in my mind biting the dog myself, fiercely, ferociously, and just kind of be walking along the street, because the dog will certainly sense, if I go into myself, the dog will sense that straight away. And it's more likely then the dog will chase me, especially if I go into myself, or I vacate myself, which that's a common thing for people, just to go, they vacate themselves and there they are, just like ready to be taken, practically. So this idea of meeting in the energy that's there to equal it, rather than being, like if my hand was there and it was held solid and an object was coming through, it's more likely that the impact of that really, is going to have an impact. But what happens when or there's a meeting of that energy, actually an harnessing of it. So someone comes toward me with an energy and I harness that energy and I double it, because I take this person in the direction that they're going in. Like they're coming towards me and I bring the person and take them in the energy that they're going. And in that moment that I double the force that they've fitted in, that's a message to the brain. Anyway, so pleasure neuro inhibits aversion. So what is it that your clients are doing during the day that is actually about bringing pleasure to themselves? Is there something that they're really interested in reading? Are they making something with their hands? Are they being creative? Are they learning something in life? Because those things are very important. Learning is what creates bliss. And that the kinesthetic self, when I would shake your hand, right, that's a kinesthetic anchor of excellence. When anybody's ever shaken your hand before, you're reminded of having done a job well done, you know, when somebody's ever shaken your hand. So that feeling, and that movement is a kinesthetic anchor of excellence. And so the kinesthetic self happens to be the strongest, one of our strongest ways of accessing state-specific behaviour, so that you are noticing how you sit. We're going to be doing full body calibration today, and that you're noticing the shape of your body. And somebody said yesterday, well, how are you all of a sudden able to shift into feeling, then hearing, and then seeing? And then I'm sharing with you how you do this. You'll notice that whenever I'm using the senses in a sequence, most often I'm putting kinesthetic, auditory, and visual, because all of our geniuses and our prophets all processed information this way. And this leads directly to whole brain functioning. This is a distinction that's whole brain functioning. The distinction that's neuro-linguistic programming is visual, auditory, kinesthetic. And in whole brain functioning, this is the reverse. We are teaching people feeling, auditory, and then seeing. And this is very ancient. This understanding is very ancient. And this understanding gives us the use of all of our brain, because you can imagine a child's face is slapped and then the parents said something to the child. Just in that moment that this child is taken into their feelings this way, the information is shunted to the right hemisphere like a siphon. And the left hemisphere doesn't have the information later on in life. Because that feeling that the child was left went turned on this hemisphere and neuroinhibited this hemisphere, so that then this hemisphere has the information later on in life and this hemisphere doesn't. This hemisphere has the ability to put into language things, and this hemisphere doesn't have the same degree of language ability like that. So how you're feeling when you hear something has a lot to do with the way that you hear it, how you're feeling. And so we're asking people to feel, then hear, and then see, but have a preference for how you're feeling. So when I arrive at work, I'm sensing how I feel, and I'm deciding to feel resourceful, and I'm checking out how my heart feels, how my hands feel, how I'm sitting, how I'm walking. All of these is to do with the kinesthetic self, the sound of my voice, and then things that I would think that it's to do with how I feel. So I'm always having a preference for how I feel, long before I have a preference for what I say or what I see. Has everybody got that? Bruce? Does it make sense? Patrick? In Sanskrit, the people said body, mind, and spirit. The body was the kinesthetic self, the mind was the auditory self, and the spirit was that sense of light that we are communicating on this level now. That what I'm sharing with you is involving light. It's not involving any weight.
I'm not sure why one seems to function and the other one.
Okay, because if you don't have a preference for feeling, it's possible that you're only using less than a third of your brain to process. And when you have access to your feelings, when you have a preference for exiting into your feeling, it's more likely that you have whole brain functioning. Somebody who's inhibited, rich, or feeling averse, you won't be able to get from them what they want in a design unless you are able to create an environment where they are feeling resourceful in themselves. And those of you who are training others to be, in presenting like Penny is, that's very important that Penny is able to impress upon these people who are presenting in her company this idea of, first of all, checking out how they feel, because if they're getting up in front of a group and they're not feeling well in themselves, they're not going to have access to all of their brain. I have access to all of my brain as a result of how I feel. When I get in front of a piano, and I've never had ever a piano lesson, and I play like George Winston masterfully, is because I have this feeling that I am George Winston, and that my hands are George Winston's hands, and that I am listening, like you are, to the music, and I'm imagining what I would like to hear next, and my hands are doing that completely. And what enables me to be able to do this is a feeling, because without the feeling I would not have the use of all my brain.
You said you visualized it. Is that feeling? What you described to me as
Visualizing is seeing.
So is visualization feeling?
Yes, because every sense is represented in every other sense, isn't it? So I'm going to talk about the kinesthetic, the auditory system. And in the auditory system, when the voice is deep, it has a representation of the kinesthetic self. Oh, the voice is really quick and very hard, it's got a visual component. Okay, so within the auditory system there's a representation of every other sense. So now in the visual system, what would be a representation of the kinesthetic self in the visual system?
Looking up, I don't know.
A darker colour is more kinesthetic, going more into the earth, away from light, becoming more solid. That's so a brighter colour and a lighter colour is involving more light, more vision, and a darker colour is involving more feeling, kinesthetic feeling.
Dave, you said the more mainstream NLP techniques utilize a different hierarchy.
Yes.
Of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic.
Yes.
And
VAC.
in what way?
Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. The people who set this up, I say, are mostly sorting information this way. And not only that, but the people in our hierarchy, in our culture, are top-heavy with living in their head. These people are living in their head. They're hearing and they're seeing and they're not using their body to feel. Our leaders, because of the school system and everything, we have graduated people who have the ability to live in their head. Right? They cut off the rest of their body and they totally live in their head. They have value what they hear and they value what they see, and they have the ability not so much to value what they feel about things.
Could you give me a small example of a way that you would work with a client in the VAC system versus or as compared to
in whole brain functioning, what we would do is focus on accessing whole brain functioning for the person, because that's why they're going through life, why they've come to you. They've come to you because they want this autonomy in themselves, and they want a levelness and feeling of equilibrium. And the one thing we're saying is if somebody's coming to you, and they're kind of walking around like this, or they're kind of, when you ask them to stretch for something, they're kind of stretching like this, something, no matter what you would say in neuro-linguistic programming, it's not going to help. It won't help unless this person's actually going to stretch, really stretch, and you can see that they're going to stretch for something in their life. And it's no use shaping all of this other stuff, that the stuff, really the shape is what you see here happening. How's the person using their voice? How is the person feeling when they interact with others? What are they doing with their body? Because these are the things that are tangible, that you can shape this. But you can't shape an Oedipus complex. You can't even see that. And that we've grown up in a world really which is wanting to shape things which are abstract, and there really isn't a way of getting a handle on that. The things that you can get a handle on is those things that you can see. This is called analog sculpting. This is sculpting the person's kinesthetic self to access state-specific behaviour. And it's pressing upon the person the importance of how they're feeling, what they're doing in their body. And it's completely a focus on movement. So for instance, somebody comes to me and they say, well, every time I go to this meeting I really feel intimidated. This person intimidates the hell out of me, and I don't even have the use of my brain. And so then what I do is go directly to what is occurring in the person's brain, not something else. Not, oh, well, how is this person, what does this person say to you, or Nothing like that. I go directly to this person's experience. What is the representation that you have inside your head of this person? Point to where this person is. I'm involving the kinesthetic self, and the person says, oh, this person's here. And by what the person's doing with their arm, I know the height of the person, and I know how close the person is to them. And what I sense about the person who's feeling intimidated is this person is much larger than I am in my brain. This person that's intimidating me is huge. I'm seeing them in my brain here. And when I see them in my brain here, and I ask the person, how much room do you have in your head to think about things yourself? And the person says, I don't have any room. This other person's taking up all the space in my head. And that's the truth, neurologically, physiologically. So that then when I say, is this person someone who you care about? And they say, yes. And I say, well, what would happen? Would you enjoy having this person very close to you and shrink them now and put them in your hand? Like a term of endearment. And then the person sees this person in their hand, small and close, and in a place that they're able to have all the room in their brain now, all this room, to be processing information actually, because the person's only taking up this much space now. And this is the understanding and the use of the vestibular system, which is a distinction, which is whole brain functioning distinction as well. It's the understanding of the use of the vestibular system. And this understanding doesn't exist from the founders of neurolinguistic programming at the moment.
It doesn't exist where?
It doesn't exist from the founders of neurolinguistic programming. It exists in whole brain functioning. And there has been some writings about this in VAC. This is the NLP journal. But for the most part, this is something that we are developing and that we've developed. So it'll be important that you are able to read that paper on the vestibular system in your practitioner's manual, because you will be right up there. You'll be in front in your understanding of the use of this sense, because the vestibular system is a sense. So, there's a distinction that the vestibular system is integrating the sensory motor complex, and that the vestibular system is what drives the other systems. So if you could imagine that now all the senses were going to come in and be connected to this microphone, that the microphone would have the ability to be acting like a switch, and that the vestibular system is like this, because the vestibular system is the first sense to form on Earth. It's the first sense to form completely, in our development. It forms before the kinesthetic system does. The vestibular system is fully developed, in the ectoderm stage, which is the stage of the nerves and tissues and skin. The ectoderm stage. And so the vestibular system is connecting all of the nerves, the fascia, and connective tissue together. And the vestibular system is regulating the tonus in my body. It's what omits one sense if it's loading the system. So someone has a visual image of themselves which is not something that's comfortable, and every time the person goes into that system, the visual system, the brain learns not to go into that system, because what's there is something which is, creating maybe discomfort for the person. The vestibular system is what shunts that. It's what's driving the brain stem, the vestibular system. So that if you wanted to turn the brightness up is a vestibular predicate. What enables me to know, to perceive that I'm standing up, is the receptors in the head, in my head predominantly. So if you're standing in an elevator and the elevator goes up, it's the vestibular system which enables you. It's the pull of the bones, inside here, on a gelatinous material with tiny little hairs in it, that actually the endolymph that enable me to know that I've moved sideways, or I've gone underneath something, or I come out, or I go inside. All of these words are vestibular predicates.
Is it the vestibular system that when you're standing, before you get on the elevator, you read
It's
it?
vestibular.
Right, you relive the elevator experience before even being in it.
Okay, so the thought process is activating the vestibular system. The vestibular system is part of the thought process. It is the thought process. Yeah. So, for instance, in an Omnimax cinema, you can be sitting there, right, and you're watching a chase pursuit, and it gets you to push your foot on the brake. You know, I mean, of course, there's not a brake there, or it gets you to duck like this. You know, something comes swinging towards you. You know, because actually. Passive movement is only a recent phenomena. This idea of getting in a car, getting on a surfboard or a set of roller skates, and passive movement is only a recent phenomena. Mostly active movement has been what it is that's there. And so the brain is not able quite to dissociate from the realization of what it is that I'm seeing. It activates the physiology. We did a little experiment to show everyone this the other day at Penny's in Penny's work environment, where we had someone come out and I asked them to imagine that a purse on their arm was pulling one arm down. It was getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And this person had their arms out, and of course they were level here when they started, but slowly but surely, you know, as I was saying, this person getting heavier and heavier, their arm ended up there. And it was simply the words was actually activating the physiology of the person, and our words do. Our words have a physiology. Another distinction is that is this idea of playfulness and the way that we are sensing the value of playfulness, being playful with each other, and the idea of eliciting resourceful physiology in those people around us, and whether you play with your mates at home, whether you wrestle them, and how much are you playing in life? Because playfulness is eliciting whole brain functioning. And that's one distinction here, that's a whole brain functioning distinction, is that we're primarily interested in what's working, not what's not working. We're interested in what is working and what would be there if everything was working. And there's a focus and an orientation that we are teaching our practitioners to be focused when you are with others on what it is that's working. And that the body is the mind's experience of itself. Other distinctions are that we are teaching full body calibration. Neuro-linguistic programming is teaching eye accessing cues, mostly. And that we are teaching full body calibration. We are teaching the use, when you are watching something occurring with the body, what is this meaning actually? What's occurring inside the person? And we've taken this beyond just eye movements, right into the body. This is a distinction that's part of this training. And that there's the physical manifestations of the submodalities of feeling power and feeling inhibited. That those muscle groups that rage you against the Earth's gravitational field, right, these are the muscles that you are wired to when you are feeling powerful in your body. So it's your quadriceps that extend the leg here. It's the back muscles here which bring you out like this. It's your deltoids which bring the arms out like this, okay? It's your tricep here which extends the arm, alright? All of these muscles are wired to states of power. When you're feeling powerful, the way that you're able to feel power in your body actually is that finely tuned, you've actually concentrated a little on, you're drawing your energy from these muscles. And you can imagine the muscle groups that are holding me against the Earth's gravitational field. Whereas the muscles which contract, all right, these are the muscle groups which are involved in inhibited states. So it's this muscle here which shortens the leg. So you'll notice that people in hospitals who have let go, you know, you'll notice that they're kind of walking around like this, you know. And this person is really quite feeling quite inhibited about their situation. because what's activated is this muscle here and these muscles. So when somebody comes to me in New York in my practice, sometimes I come in to find out how they get inhibited. And so I really teach them how they can easily get inhibited whenever they want to. So that they're feeling like they can have some control over this actually, that this is something that, oh gee, you mean this is what I do to get inhibited? And I would say to them, well, you've got to think of something so that there isn't an end out. You know, so that's important. You have to think of something in a way that's averse and actually, you know, not allowing you a way through, and you have to use modal operators of necessity. You must, should, you will, can't, won't, don't. All modal operators of necessity rather than you can allow. I wonder if you did. Possibly you can. Maybe you could. All of these ways of framing things is allowing the listener choice. And they would have to get their stomach muscles into it, and then they would have to kind of get these muscles into it that are pulling the arms in like this. And then they would have to start really activating the hamstring, the biceps femoris, at the back of the leg here. They would have to activate that, and then the more tension that they can kind of bring into it, or the more stillness they can get, and whilst their thought processes are focusing on something that's inhibiting, the more likely it is that they could have an excellent state of inhibition.
With leaning to the down.
Oh yes, and yes, you would want to get them down like this, and you would want to make sure that they start to not use their visual system, because that's very important, right? Because it's the visual system that actually enables a person to be able to dissociate the easiest, to go from one thing to the next. The visual system, is what enables us to do that.
These people want to become inhibited, is that what you said?
I use language like that, okay, because it's showing the person, it's possible really just to get inhibited whenever you feel like it. Like if an actor came to me and they were really wanting to learn how to be inhibited, because an actor can tear. If the scene requires them to tear, then they can tear. So an actor is coming to me to find out how they do this, and I can teach them easily. And then the person's realising that they have some control over it. It's just the main thing, actually. It's just not something that happens to them, And another distinction is the language of peace. This idea of realising that the language that we use shapes our reality, and that we get what it is that we focus on. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we're going outside to do a group initiative. A training, and he had what they call pin-toed skin. Do you know what this is? Pin-toed skin. He had like places on his skin where kind of everything was sort of burning up a bit. And by the end of the training, like after about 3 days, his skin had cleared up completely, and he was really amazed. Anyway, so ever since then, he's called me up on the phone. Every now and then he calls me up and to say hello. And anyway, this day Mike called me up, and he said that there's a famous woman that I want you to meet, and I think that you should give her a call. And I said, what would it be that if I was to give her a call? And I said, I don't think that I could solicit like that. And then I said to Mike that I thought that there was another way. And I said to Mike that if he was to see her, that would be the strongest way that she would know what it was that I was about, because she knew Mike, and that she would see what it was that had happened to him. And that the importance was on the form that the communication took, and the energy that you sense about something that you are interested in bringing to you, and then the energy, in fact, that you're able to harness to bring that to you. I think that there wasn't anything more powerful, really, that could happen to that woman than than Mike going and seeing her and sharing with her what it was that had happened to him. And that she would know what it was that was here as a result of seeing Mike, and that was the strongest way to go about doing that. So it's the form that the message takes. And I guess in anything that there's there's 5 things. There's the teacher, there's the message, there's the form that the message takes, and there's the time, and there's the place. And so when all 5 of those things are taken care of, in the Vedic tradition they would call this excellent. So that those of you who are in front of groups, it's a good idea to sense those 5 things and sense how it is that you are taking care of those things. So sometimes the timing of something is appropriate in another place. And how much sense it makes to be living in the moment and sculpting from what it is that's present, rather than coming with a recipe necessarily. That you're able to get to a place where you're able to sculpt with what it is that's there. So we're going to be, from now on, we're going to be learning a couple of change techniques every day. And it's possible that you do a change technique on someone, and when you are completely understanding of what it is that's underneath this, then I would say go ahead and start to use these change techniques. And if there's a way for you to use the change technique so that it's going into the person's unconscious mind, that's the best way. I would say the best change work really happens below consciousness, because it doesn't involve the conscious mind at all. And consciousness is actually a limited phenomena. The unconscious mind is aware of everything. Most of us are taught to limit what it is that we're aware of somewhat to what it is we're conscious of. And consciousness is a limited phenomena. The unconscious mind is aware of everything. So I'd like to share a story about helping, because I think that some of you certainly are helping others, and you're in the act of helping. I would say for the most part, most of us ordinary people, the way that we help truly is by modelling, and that someone who can help, truly someone who can help, has learnt to see. So this story is about helping and learning to see. There's this sage walking in the city with a mentor. They're both walking along and footpath, and the sage sees this snail and bends down and picks up the snail and puts it to the side under a vine. And the mentor of the sage said, wanted to know why the sage had done this. And the sage quipped that she thought that this snail would be stomped on, and put the snail to the side under the vine because she thought it would be stomped on. And the mentor said to the sage, how did you know there was not poison under the vine, and that the snail with all its might had struggled thus far to get across the footpath, and you interrupted its personal power? And so this sage felt like she wanted to put the snail back, and then this mentor said no. Fool enough it was that an idiot had crossed this snail's path, that you would shift it again and run the risk of interrupting its personal power. And so then this sage was bewildered because all this time she had thought that she could help her fellow beings, and the answer came back that someone who can help has learned to see, and that someone who can help has a degree of formlessness. There isn't anything that you could say about this thing that it stands by itself. There isn't anything that you could attach to this thing that it stands by itself. This is formlessness. Formlessness is when you are truly helping somebody, that the person is party to the process and that you could be nothing. So that the doctor is put back inside the person. So real power is when there's formlessness there. There isn't any form, but formlessness. There isn't anything that you could attach to this thing, that it stands by itself. Real power is like when you get a parking ticket.